Hello and welcome to the New Gig podcast. I'm your host, Glen Hodgson, and today I'm delighted to be joined by speaker, consultant, and digital nomad, Katrina Cobb. How are you doing, Katrina?
I am excellent, Glenn. Thanks so much for having me on.
It's a pleasure. So take us through your journey. How did you get to the whole freelancing gig, sat in Mexico talking to me? What were the steps you took and tell us about what you're doing?
Oh, goodness. So I actually started a very traditional career in architecture and was moving down that track in sustainable design and how to make the world a better place through smarter design. But I made some personal choices that the lifestyle of living in a cubicle and working for 30 years for the same company wasn't maybe in alignment to my goals,
Yeah.
and discovered entrepreneurship. Yeah,
Yeah.
discovered entrepreneurship almost by accident and ended up launching a couple businesses. And in the course of that, discovered the world of coaching and consulting, discovered all these things, and had the itch again to make some changes
Right.
and find a way to travel and have a bit more of the lifestyle freedom that really the modern day has made a possibility for those that have a little ingenuity and a little will to do things differently.
Yeah.
And sold everything, and that was 3 years ago, and I've been working through Latin America in
Yes.
6, 7 different countries, having a chance to explore new cultures while also working with clients all over the world on their own
Yeah.
businesses and what they're doing. So
My goodness. So it's a real world turns upside down kind of situation for you, Katrina, to really sort of say,
definitely.
that's it. Yeah. And what was the kind of the tipping point? Because it's interesting when I speak to people who go through these this kind of sort of realization stages. What was kind of the tipping point that you thought, well, you go from this seems like a good idea. I want more flexibility. I want to be able to travel to actually saying, right, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do it.
I think it's two parts. My upbringing, I grew up with a parent in the military, and so I'm
Yeah.
used to moving around, having a new front door, a new home, a new environment, a new social circle every other year or so,
Yeah.
and that transition sort of stuck with me. The idea of discovery and new places, new things to learn, new people to meet. That was always kind of at my core. When I started my first on-site location, brick and mortar business, I got down in the weeds of my first business and became a bit of a workaholic.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until some friends invited me on an impromptu trip to Guatemala 6 years in that I realized I hadn't had a passport stamp in 7 years. And that was just so
Okay.
unlike my
Yeah.
life and the way I thought I was going to live. I got tunnel vision, as it
Yeah.
were. And stepping off the plane, I made a promise myself because there was just the lightness of remembering how much fun
Yes.
exploring is and how much fun I have being in new locations and new cultures, speaking a different language,
Yeah.
learning the different way people think, because there's so much to be said for putting yourself in a different culture and how
Mm,
much you can learn, how that expands you in the way you think about the world. And I made a promise on the plane that I was going to change my life on
mm,
the way back. And it was so that was part one. Part two, I was working for a global company
mm.
doing business coaching consulting with 3 physical offices: Sydney, London, Florida. And the company decided to go fully remote a
Right.
few months after I got back. I was already working remotely, but it
Yeah.
was the light bulb that switched the, oh, I don't actually have to physically be somewhere to work. Like other companies are doing this. I'm already
Yeah.
sort of doing this. And the only thing tying me here is my physical business, but that I can sell, that I can move on, that I can run remotely, I can do all sorts of things with it. So it was really a light bulb switch of,
Mm.
oh yeah, the world is making this possible. We don't actually need to be rooted in one place anymore, which suits me to a T. So
Yeah. And how much is linked to the whole element of digitalization, which is facilitating the world of work that is, as you say, that work is no longer a physical entity that you travel across cities at busy times and sit there 9 till 6, 5 days a week. This kind of facilitation of the change through digitalization. What's your thoughts about that?
I think it's a big piece of my story, right? Because when I first started my brick and mortar business, I was looking for resources, and I started locally, and I went to the chambers, and I went to the sings, and I went and started networking. But the help that I found was actually digital remote help through a coaching company that was global, and everything was offered virtually. And so that opened a crack in the door of how people do things. But
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing is And even before the pandemic hit last year, what we're seeing is just technology reaching other places
Yeah.
and so many more things being cloud-based, being online. It's really opening up opportunities for everybody to think a little differently about what it means to work, what it means to deliver value, what it means to leverage your genius and serve
Yeah.
people in creative ways. And I think it's only going to be an increasing trend. So it was a big reason that facilitated me growing. And even once I started researching what it would look like to be a digital nomad
Yeah.
and do this fully remote online digital work opportunity for myself and entrepreneurship, more and more countries that now have the infrastructure even to have decent speeds of Wi-Fi, to have connectivity, to
Yeah.
have these sorts of things in place. It's really becoming a huge boost to their economies and attracting sort of a next level of not just tourism opportunities, but
Yeah.
kind of work and economic opportunities. So it's interesting seeing the trends, and it's been a huge piece of how I've sort of navigated the last
Mm.
couple of years.
And it seems to be that the big drawback before has been mindset, but you've been great to be able to navigate your way around some of the organizations, some of the companies that are a bit more enlightened, who've already been ahead of the curve for several years. But of course, now we're getting more and more companies that are playing catch up as they're forced to offer remote working opportunities given the pandemic and lockdowns, this kind of thing. They need to adapt just to be able to keep operating.
Yeah, I think last year really forced the issue. I think there
Yeah.
was a trend in that direction, and and especially seeing not even just companies like the one I had been associated with shutting down physical locations and putting everything remote.
Yeah.
I think the world is shrinking because of technology, which gives us more access to different skill sets, gives us more access to a wider variety of thoughts and ideas. I
Yeah.
think it's an incubator for innovation when you can actually work with people that are maybe not right next door in the same microculture
Yeah.
and have the same lived experience. So I think it was inevitable. But having a lot of friends in more traditional workspaces and in still traditional roles
Yeah.
and seeing the shifts they went through last year, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how far the pendulum swings back. And to be fair, some people like the remote thing. Some people
Yeah.
like being fully digital. Others really need that human face-to-face connection and crave sort of that social interaction that was the classic kind of hallmark of traditional employment. So I do think there's
Yeah.
going to be middle ground
Yeah.
and people having more options. But what's becoming clear is it's no longer going to be an option to not have flexibility in terms
Yeah.
of, are you open to remote or digital
Yeah.
employment options and or contracts. Yeah.
Mm. And is this going to create opportunities, but also challenges for organizations which need to think about a hybrid strategy, whether it's data protection, whether it's benefits, whether it's sort of the rights and responsibilities? There's maybe a whole new set of things that individuals need to think of as organizations adapt.
It really is. It is creating, yeah, a whole new set of problems to solve, but they're solvable. And I think that's the
Yeah.
beauty of kind of the way we innovate and we evolve in terms of our workforce and our cultures around the world.
Yeah.
So there for sure is benefits because depending on where you live, that's different. Some companies are shifting pay scales to go with cost of living, and
Right.
I have mixed feelings about that because I do
Yeah.
think there is potential to leverage kind of lifestyle choices that way.
Yeah.
It's part of my decision matrix. But I think, yeah, the data security, of course, when everybody's remote is going to be an ongoing issue. But these
Mm.
things they're solvable. They're just another level of consideration for many. Yeah.
Exactly. They should. Let's look at the roses rather than the thorns. I think it's a good way to look at this. But if we're thinking about this, we've talked about the opportunities and your personal case here, Katrina. But what are the top three downsides? What comes up where you think, oh my goodness? From time to time, there's bound to be things that make it more complicated. But it'd be great to hear sort of a little bit of the eyes wide open approach as well on the negatives.
Yeah, this is very much in tune with a lot of conversations that everybody's been having this year. Have they sort of been forced into this work situation over the
Yeah,
last year? I think the biggest drawbacks to a fully remote workforce or a fully remote position or an independent freelancer who's digital only, right, would be, do you have other avenues for social interaction and social engagement? Because
yeah,
you can only do so much through a screen and
yeah,
video calls, and everybody's getting video call fatigue. So there's a whole other issue of how we communicate that way.
of
So I do
course.
think the balancing personal professional life with having a social outlet, and also, do you have boundaries to unplug? Because when you can be on anytime, anywhere, how
Mm,
do you make sure you're off sometime
yeah,
somewhere is sort of the
absolutely.
question to ask folks. I think the other is more just logistics. When we become so dependent on the opportunities to connect remotely in digital resources, if there's a power outage, if there's a Wi-Fi drop, if there's, the
Yeah,
technical logistics of a
absolutely.
security breach, or your laptop gets stolen when you're, in another country and you don't have the chance to just replace it very easily. There's just logistics issues with
Yeah,
that aspect of this lifestyle, which again, it's all solvable, but it doesn't
yeah.
necessarily mean it's all convenient.
Exactly, exactly. Well, it's great to shine a light on some of these things as well. I think that it's not people need to have their eyes open when they come
Yeah.
into these things. And you're a seasoned campaigner in this one, Katrina, but individuals, what should they be thinking about in terms of personal branding? How do they navigate this? How do they find the way through the maze of the freelancing digital nomad lifestyle?
I think that's a brilliant question. I think it's going to be a little individual for
Mm,
everybody, because there is still, even, 2021, there is still the idea of what a nomad is, as this backpacker, laptop on the beach, sort of
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
freewheeling lifestyle, not that serious, not very highly paid, not,
Right.
not necessarily what you would think of as a professional. But I would challenge that idea that so many digital nomads work from co-working spaces, have set business hours, have like
Yeah.
a very professional way they approach
Mm,
their work. And I think when you're starting to brand yourself, if that's a concern of yours, is to, will bigger companies and bigger employers take you seriously and trust kind of intuitively that you are pulling up your end of the work side. Some of it's how you
yeah.
present yourself, right? So there's a way to showcase some aspects of the
Mm,
lifestyle as part of your brand. And I think that's fair to do. I definitely incorporate some of the travel and some of the remote locations into the way I show up in the world digitally, because that is where
yeah.
your brand's going to be evident in these days.
Yeah.
But I think you get to pick and choose how much of that becomes front and center
Yeah.
when it comes to the professional side. And the other piece of it is, like you said, there's pros and cons to everything. There's so many positives in working with an independent freelancer who maybe maybe in a different location, maybe around the world, maybe a different time zone. For some of the
Yes.
things, the time zone actually is the advantage in being able to manage different work shifts or have stuff done by the time you log in the morning because of
Yeah.
somebody else's shift. So I think there's positives to that. I think that working with independent individuals who are really taking ownership and initiative says a lot,
Yeah.
versus just an employee who's there to clock in, clock out, and doesn't have the same investment level in the work that
Exactly.
they're doing. Because when you're independent, this is your business, it's your lifeblood. Word of mouth matters, referrals
Yeah.
matter, your professional reputation matters. And I think freelancers intuitively take better care of that, because
Mm,
this is their world. So there's a lot of perks
mm,
to working on this. And I think it's identifying those and making sure they're part of your brand as well,
mm.
which can help.
And I really like the way in which you put your finger on the fact that this is not a case of sort of skiving up, having a sort of a 2 or 3 day week and sitting on a beach. This is a way of working, but it still means you've got to work. It's hard work. It's the same things that you need to think of: the organization, the preparation, branding yourself, doing the new business, the marketing, the follow up. It's not a way to get out of that.
Business is business. So
Yeah,
whether you're sitting in your home, whether you're sitting in an office, whether you're sitting in a co-working space somewhere around the world, business is business. So yes,
yeah,
you're still going to need availability. You're still going to need business systems and follow-up processes, marketing, all of the things. You're still going to have all that. So I think those that take that part seriously are the ones that are going to thrive and be able to actually enjoy the other freedoms that come with this kind of a lifestyle opportunity.
yeah. So it's doing things properly. There's no excuses, no shortcuts when it comes to doing the business in the right way. And what do you think the future holds here, Katrina? You're living and working this every day, but we're also seeing the trends globally that the sort of freelancing digital nomad lifestyle is certainly more attractive, both for individuals but also companies who want to put in place a gig strategy. So what's your thoughts and expectations for the future?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think companies, to your point, are recognizing that this is an opportunity to tap into some really great talent
Yeah.
if they can structure it that way. But I think thinking globally, what I'm seeing and what I'm excited about is more countries and more governments seeing that this is a trend
Yeah.
and making new visa accommodations for this sort of lifestyle, trying to
Yes.
actually attract really intelligent people to come live and work in their countries and experience their cultures and invest in their economies
Yeah.
and make that easier to do, because that has been a barrier for
Mm.
people that like the opportunity to be global. The legalities of it has been a barrier, but we're seeing some encouraging trends, and I think that's only going to continue. So I'm very
Yeah.
optimistic about that side of it in making this more of an accepted way of working and
Yeah.
reducing some of the red tape that prevent people from experiencing other cultures, investing locally in other cultures,
Yeah.
and still contributing to the global economy and those sorts of things. So I'm excited about those two aspects.
So it is a rosy future that we should see for the sector and for individuals.
I believe so. I don't think there's any way around it. I think if anything,
Yeah.
the last year has proven and accelerated people moving in this direction, even those that potentially this was never on their radar,
Mm.
being forced to work remote and independent or being trimmed because of company shortfalls with the pandemic and having to find other opportunities and start something independent just as a backup plan or
Yeah.
plan B.
Yeah.
Now they're discovering what's
Mm.
possible with the independent freelance sort of consulting lifestyle. And it doesn't always have to be digital nomads. You can still do that from your home office, but then erase a commute, right? Spend more time with
Yeah.
quality with family, be able to reprioritize your schedule and accommodate for the other things that are happening in your life, even if it's not travel.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's it's not possible at this stage to avoid that this is a trend and this is only going to continue. And smart companies will take advantage of that. Smart governments will take advantage of that. And I think smart individuals can take
Yeah.
advantage of that.
Yeah, so it's being adaptable and actually seeing the opportunities and adapting yourself and your outlook towards this. And if I had to press you and say, if there's anyone maybe listening to this thinking about taking the plunge and taking on the freelance lifestyle, what are the sort of the top three tips would you say that you'd offer out there, Katrina?
Well, I think most people, the biggest holdback is going to be confidence. Can they do this or not? Is there going to be enough
Yeah,
income? Can they replace their income? Can they
yeah,
manage that sort of independent workload? So, for most people, I would say start on the side, see if you can go out and get your first or second freelance client
yeah,
and have that little bit of overlap period to give yourself some confidence. Because if you could do it once, then you can start to believe it's repeatable
mm,
and work through that. So that would be probably step one. I think step two would be sit back and think about what's important in terms of lifestyle, daily schedule, finances, family and social priorities, those sorts of
yeah,
things, and start to get an idea. If there were no limits, no restrictions, no boxes, no containers, what would each of those look like in a
yeah,
perfect world? Because that's the true beauty of being an entrepreneur and like shifting from potentially being employed to independent. You get to decide those things, which is both terrifying and liberating at the same time. So it is going to be a bit of a thought exercise to
yeah.
ask the what if questions and challenge some assumptions you've made about what needs to happen for your life and your career. So I would say those are probably the first two.
Yeah.
And three would just be have a little fun and go for it. I don't know. There's no other simple way to say take a leap of faith, rip the band-aid off, trust yourself enough to figure it out and put
Yes.
yourself in circles of people that will help you figure it out. Maybe that's the third step, is if this is something you want to do, look for the communities of
Yeah.
freelancers, of independents, look for the coaches and mentors and resources in that realm, because there's a ton at this stage of the game as
Yeah.
well, and put yourselves in the circles of folks that you want to learn from and emulate, and that will also reinforce some of the confidence that this can be a career choice for you.
Excellent. Well, fantastic advice, hints, tips, but also the first person examples and experiences. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you on, Katrina, and to be able to share and show that this is something that's possible, and you live through experience, and you're taking this forward. So it's absolutely fantastic to have you on. Great to hear your thoughts, and wish you every success as you go forward.
Thanks so much, Glenn. Appreciate the conversation you guys are having and happy to contribute.
Pleasure. Thanks now.
Thanks.